October 12th, Oak Ridge County. 17-year-old Chloe Elizabeth Vance did not walk into the courtroom. She sashayed. Dressed in a modest white blouse designed to scream innocence, she offered a chilling, dimpled smile to the parents of the girl she was accused of butchering. For Chloe, this was not justice. It was an act. She was the star of a high-stakes drama, and she believed she had the perfect script. The initial charge of misleading investigators was a joke to her, a minor speed bump on her way back to her socialite life. She relied on the silence of her best friend Alana and a carefully constructed web of lies. But a single hidden video file, the trophy video, would destroy everything. Chloe believed she was the smartest person in the room, playing a game of chess while the prosecution played checkers. She did not realize that the iron gavel was waiting, and the best friend she bullied was about to hand over the digital noose. By the time Judge Sterling spoke her name for the last time, the performance would be over. The morning of the arraignment arrived with unseasonable heat for October in Florida. The Oak Ridge County Courthouse was a Spanish colonial revival building with arched windows and terracotta tiles, constructed in 1928 when the county still believed in the permanence of justice. By 8 in the morning, the media vans had already claimed their territory along the perimeter fence. Reporters with perfectly coiffed hair rehearsed their stand-ups while camera operators adjusted light reflectors. The case had everything the 24-hour news cycle craved. A beautiful victim, a wealthy defendant, a crime so senseless it defied rational explanation. Inside the courthouse, bailiff Marcus Webb unlocked courtroom 3A and began his morning ritual. He checked the gallery seating, ensured the American flag stood at proper attention, and placed fresh legal pads at the judge's bench. He had worked in this building for 23 years and had seen every variety of human depravity parade through these doors. But something about the Vance case unsettled him in a way he could not articulate. Perhaps it was the age of the defendant. Perhaps it was the calculated coldness in her eyes when she had been brought in for initial processing. He finished his preparations and took his position near the door, waiting for the circus to begin. The victim's family arrived first. Thomas and Rebecca Morrison walked with the careful steps of people who had forgotten how to exist in the world. Their daughter, 16-year-old Emma Morrison, had been missing for 8 days before her body was discovered in a shallow grave near the old phosphate mines on the eastern edge of the county. The medical examiner had determined she died from blunt force trauma to the skull, delivered with such violence that fragments of bone had been found embedded in the surrounding soil. Thomas Morrison wore a dark suit that hung loose on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds since his daughter's death. Rebecca clutched a framed photograph of Emma, taken at her Sweet 16 party just 4 months earlier. In the photo, Emma wore a yellow sundress and smiled with the unguarded joy of someone who believed the world was fundamentally good. They took their seats in the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecution table. Lead prosecutor Sarah Jenkins entered through the side door reserved for court officers. At 42, she had spent 18 years in the state attorney's office and had built a reputation for methodical preparation and devastating closing arguments. She wore a charcoal grey suit and carried 2 banker's boxes filled with discovery materials. Her co-counsel, Assistant State Attorney Michael Torres, followed with a rolling cart containing additional evidence files. They began arranging their materials with the precision of surgeons preparing for a complex operation. Jenkins glanced at the Morrison family and offered a small, respectful nod. She had met with them 7 times since the body was discovered. Each meeting had been an exercise in controlled anguish as she explained what the trial would demand of them. The evidence, the photographs, the testimony, the weight. The defense team arrived next. Attorney Richard Holbrook was a 60-year-old veteran of South Florida criminal defense work. He specialized in representing the children of wealthy families who found themselves on the wrong side of the law. Drunk driving, drug possession, assault. He was effective because he understood that juries wanted to believe the best about attractive, well-spoken young people. He wore a navy suit with a red power tie and carried a single leather briefing case. His strategy was already clear. Paint Chloe as a victim of circumstance, a good girl caught up in tragedy. Emphasize her youth, her lack of criminal history, her bright future. Create reasonable doubt through aggressive cross-examination. Make the jury see her as someone's daughter, not a monster. Then Chloe arrived. She entered through the secured entrance, escorted by 2 deputies. She wore the standard orange jumpsuit issued to pretrial detainees, with a white undershirt visible at the collar. The outfit should have been humbling. It was designed to strip away identity and status. But somehow, Chloe wore it like designer fashion. She had tied her honey blonde hair back in a low ponytail with a small white ribbon, probably provided by her attorney to soften her appearance. Her makeup was minimal but expertly applied. Mascara to widen her eyes, a touch of blush to suggest vulnerability. Clear lip gloss instead of bold color. She looked like a college student heading to class, not someone accused of murder. As the deputies removed her handcuffs, Chloe surveyed the courtroom with the analytical gaze of a theater director reviewing a stage. She located the pool camera mounted in the corner, the single video feed allowed in the courtroom to provide footage for all media outlets. She adjusted her posture slightly, angling her face to catch better light. Then she spotted her father, Gregory Vance, sitting in the 3rd row. Gregory was a prominent real estate developer who had made his fortune during the South Florida building boom. He wore a custom-tailored suit and an expression of carefully controlled neutrality. Chloe turned toward him and winked. Actually winked. As if this were all an unfortunate misunderstanding that would soon be resolved. Gregory did not wink back. He simply stared at his daughter with eyes that revealed nothing. Chloe took her seat next to Attorney Holbrook. He leaned over and whispered urgently in her ear. From the tight set of his jaw, he was likely reminding her to appear somber and respectful. Chloe nodded, but her expression suggested she was humoring him rather than taking his advice seriously. She adjusted the collar of her orange jumpsuit and glanced at her reflection in the glass partition that separated the defense table from the gallery. She tilted her head slightly, checking her profile. "All rise," Bailiff Webb announced. His voice carried the weight of ritual. "The Honorable Sloane Sterling presiding." Judge Sterling entered from her chambers. At 58, she had served on the circuit court bench for 12 years. She was known for running an efficient courtroom and having zero tolerance for theatrics. Her silver hair was cut in a practical bob. Her black robe was immaculate. She took her seat at the bench and reviewed the file before her with the focus of someone who took her responsibilities with deadly seriousness. She had read every page of the initial discovery. She had reviewed the crime scene photographs. She had studied the autopsy report. And she had formed a preliminary opinion about the young woman sitting at the defense table, though she would never let that opinion interfere with her judicial duties. "Be seated," Judge Sterling said. The gallery settled with the rustling of fabric and the creaking of old wooden benches. "Let the record reflect that we are convened in the matter of State of Florida versus Chloe Elizabeth Vance, case number 24-CR-4200. Miss Vance, please rise." Chloe stood. She folded her hands in front of her and assumed an expression of polite attention, like a student called on in class. "You are charged with accessory after the fact to a felony, specifically providing false information to law enforcement officers investigating the death of Emma Grace Morrison," Judge Sterling continued. "How do you plead?" Attorney Holbrook rose. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges." Chloe added a small nod, as if confirming her attorney's statement. But then she did something that made Prosecutor Jenkins grip her pen tighter. When Judge Sterling read Emma Morrison's name, Chloe rolled her eyes. It was a quick gesture, barely perceptible, but several people in the gallery saw it. Rebecca Morrison gasped. Thomas Morrison put a hand on his wife's knee to steady her. "The plea is entered," Judge Sterling said, making a note in the file. She had seen the eye roll too. Her expression did not change, but she studied Chloe with increased attention. "Bail has been set at $500,000. The defendant will remain in custody at the Oak Ridge County Detention Center pending trial. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for October 20th at 9 in the morning. Are there any preliminary motions?" Attorney Holbrook stood. "Your Honor, the defense will be filing a motion to suppress certain statements made by my client during initial questioning, as well as a motion for change of venue based on prejudicial pre-trial publicity." "Noted," Judge Sterling replied. "The state will have 14 days to respond. Anything else?" Prosecutor Jenkins rose. "Your Honor, the state requests that the defendant be ordered to provide fingerprint and palm print exemplars for comparison analysis." "Granted," Judge Sterling said. "The defendant will comply within 72 hours. She looked directly at Chloe. "Miss Vance, you are advised that you have the right to a speedy trial. You have the right to legal representation, which you have. You have the right to confront witnesses against you. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes, Your Honor," Chloe said. Her voice was clear and confident, almost cheerful. "This court takes the death of Emma Morrison with the utmost seriousness," Judge Sterling continued. There was steel in her voice now. "You will conduct yourself with appropriate decorum during all proceedings. Do I make myself clear?" Chloe offered a small, dimpled smile. "Perfectly clear, Your Honor." As the judge reviewed her calendar for scheduling, Prosecutor Jenkins stood again. "Your Honor, if I may, the state believes that additional charges may be forthcoming as the investigation continues. We wanted to make the court and defense counsel aware." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Attorney Holbrook's head snapped toward Jenkins. "What additional charges?" "The investigation is ongoing," Jenkins replied smoothly. "We will notify the court and defense as appropriate through proper discovery channels." Judge Sterling raised a hand for silence. The state will follow all discovery rules and timelines. This hearing is adjourned. She struck her gavel once. As the bailiffs moved to escort Chloe out, the defendant turned toward the gallery one final time. She found the pool camera and offered a sad, brave smile. The performance of a young girl facing unjust persecution. Then she looked directly at Thomas and Rebecca Morrison. For just a moment, her mask slipped. Her eyes went cold and flat, like a shark's eyes. Then the deputies took her arms and led her through the side door. Prosecutor Jenkins gathered her files slowly, watching the Morrison family embrace in the front row. She had told them this would be difficult, but she had also made them a promise. She would find the truth. She would build an airtight case, and she would make sure that whoever killed their daughter would face the consequences. As she walked toward the exit, she paused near the defense table. Attorney Holbrook was packing his briefcase. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, Miss Vance," Jenkins said quietly, though Chloe was already gone. Holbrook looked up. "My client is innocent until proven guilty, Counselor." Jenkins smiled. "Of course she is." She walked out, already planning her next move. The investigation had begun the moment Emma Morrison's body was discovered. Detective Robert Miller had been the lead investigator from day one. At 47, he had spent 22 years with the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Office, the last 10 in the Criminal Investigations Division. He had worked hundreds of cases: burglaries, assaults, domestic violence. But this was only his third murder investigation, and the first involving a victim so young. On October 4th, a hiker named Dennis Crawford had been walking his German Shepherd near the old phosphate mine trails when his dog started barking at a disturbed section of earth. Crawford noticed the ground had been recently dug and poorly covered. He called 911. Deputies arrived within 12 minutes and immediately secured the scene. Detective Miller got the call at 2:15 in the afternoon, while he was reviewing files at his desk. The crime scene was located 3.7 miles from the main road, accessible only by a narrow dirt trail that wound through palmetto scrub and slash pine. Miller arrived to find the area already cordoned off with yellow tape. Crime scene technicians were setting up their equipment. The air smelled of decomposition and wet earth. Miller pulled on latex gloves and approached the grave. The body was in a shallow depression, maybe 2 feet deep at most. Whoever dug this grave had done so hastily, without concern for concealment. The victim was face down, partially covered with dirt and dead leaves. She wore jeans and a pink tank top. One sneaker was missing. Miller could see trauma to the back of her skull, even from a distance. The medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Huang, was already kneeling beside the body, taking preliminary notes. "Time of death is going to be approximate," Dr. Huang said without looking up. "Based on decomposition and insect activity, I would estimate between 5 and 7 days. I will know more after autopsy." Miller photographed the scene from multiple angles. He documented the position of the body, the depth of the grave, the surrounding vegetation. A crime scene technician named Sarah Kowalski was collecting soil samples and marking them with evidence flags. Another technician was creating a 3-dimensional scan of the area using laser mapping equipment. "There are drag marks," Kowalski noted, pointing to disturbed vegetation leading from the trail. "She was moved here post-mortem. And look at this. She indicated a small object near the edge of the grave. It was a button. Distinctive brass with an ornate letter V embossed on the surface. The kind of button found on expensive clothing. "Bag it," Miller said. He leaned closer to examine the surrounding area. There, on a palmetto leaf 6 inches from the button, was a dark stain. It could be blood. The body was carefully excavated and transported to the medical examiner's office. Miller remained at the scene for another 3 hours as technicians processed every inch of the area. They found tire impressions on the dirt trail, partially degraded by rain, but still viable for analysis. They found broken branches suggesting something heavy had been dragged through the underbrush. They found a small fragment of fabric caught on a thorny vine, light blue denim that matched the victim's jeans. By 6 in the evening, Miller had preliminary identification. The victim's fingerprints matched Emma Grace Morrison, a 16-year-old junior at Oak Ridge High School. She had been reported missing by her parents on September 30th, after she failed to return home from what she told them was a study session at the library. Miller drove to the Morrison home to deliver the news that no parent should ever receive. The investigation moved quickly after that. Miller interviewed Emma's friends, teachers, and classmates. A picture emerged of a well-liked, academically successful girl who was involved in the drama club and volunteered at a local animal shelter. She had no known enemies, no history of risky behavior, no involvement with drugs or alcohol. By all accounts, she was a genuinely good kid. But 3 of Emma's friends mentioned tension with another girl at school, Chloe Vance. According to these witnesses, Chloe and Emma had both been interested in the same boy, a senior named Tyler Chen. What started as typical teenage jealousy had escalated when Tyler chose to ask Emma to homecoming instead of Chloe. The friends described Chloe as becoming increasingly aggressive and hostile toward Emma in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Miller obtained a warrant for Chloe's phone records. What he found was disturbing. Between September 15th and September 29th, Chloe had sent Emma over 400 text messages. The early messages were passive-aggressive, subtle digs about Emma's appearance or intelligence. But they quickly escalated to overt threats. "You think you're so special, but you're not. I hope you choke. Everyone would be better off if you just disappeared." The final message, sent on September 29th at 9:42 at night, simply read, "See you soon." On October 6th, 48 hours after Emma's body was discovered, Detective Miller and his partner knocked on the door of the Vance family home, a 6,000-square-foot Mediterranean-style mansion in the gated community of Cypress Estates. Gregory Vance answered. He was calm, professional, and immediately asked to call his attorney. Chloe was summoned from her bedroom. She came downstairs wearing designer loungewear and holding her phone. "Miss Vance, I am Detective Miller with the Sheriff's Office. I need to ask you some questions about Emma Morrison." Chloe sat on a white leather sofa and crossed her legs. "Oh my God, isn't it terrible what happened to her? I literally could not believe it when I heard." "When did you last see Emma?" Chloe barely hesitated. Probably like a week and a half ago at school. We weren't really friends or anything." "Did you communicate with her recently?" "Maybe. I do not really remember. We might have been in the same group chat or something." Miller held up a printed copy of the text message thread. "These are messages from your number to Emma's number. Over 400 messages in 2 weeks. Chloe's expression did not change. "Oh, those. That is just how my generation talks, detective. Everything is dramatic. We do not actually mean any of it." "You told her you hoped she would disappear." Chloe rolled her eyes, the same gesture she would later use in the courtroom. "That is literally just venting. Everyone says stuff like that when they are annoyed." "Where were you on the night of September 29th? Chloe did not hesitate. "I was at a bonfire at the beach with like 20 other people. You can ask anyone." Miller made a note. "I will need names." Chloe rattled off several names, including her best friend, Alana Whitmore. Miller wrote each one down. He studied Chloe carefully. She met his gaze with perfect confidence. No nervousness, no fidgeting. Either she was innocent, or she was an exceptionally skilled liar. "Do you own a varsity-style jacket?" Miller asked. "Designer brand with brass buttons." Chloe frowned, as if thinking. "I had one, but it was stolen like a month ago. I reported it to school security." "Do you have documentation of that report?" "Probably in my email somewhere." Miller stood. "Thank you for your time, Miss Vance. We may have additional questions." As he walked to his car, Miller's instincts were screaming. Everything about Chloe's demeanor was wrong. The lack of genuine emotion, the casual dismissal of the threatening messages, the too perfect alibi. He called Prosecutor Jenkins from his car. "I think we have our suspect," he said. Over the next week, the investigation intensified. Forensic analysis of the button found at the crime scene confirmed it came from a limited edition varsity jacket produced by a high-end designer brand. Only 300 of these jackets had been manufactured. The button's unique serial number was traced to a jacket purchased at a boutique in Miami in July. The buyer, Gregory Vance, who confirmed he bought it as a birthday gift for his daughter. The blood on the palmetto leaf near the button was tested. It matched Emma Morrison's deoxyribonucleic acid profile. Detective Miller interviewed every person at the supposed bonfire. Most confirmed there was a gathering at the beach on September 29th. But when pressed for specific details about who was there, the stories started to fall apart. Several people admitted they did not actually remember seeing Chloe. One witness, a senior named Marcus Webb, was certain Chloe never showed up. "I was wondering where she was," Marcus told Detective Miller, "because she had been talking about coming all week, but I never saw her there." The critical break came from Alana Whitmore. Alana was 17, a member of the same social circle as Chloe, and terrified. When Detective Miller and a female deputy showed up at her house on October 8th, Alana's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold a glass of water. "I gave a statement already," Alana said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I said Chloe was with me at the bonfire." Miller leaned forward. "But that is not true, is it?" Alana looked at her parents, who had insisted on being present. Tears started sliding down her cheeks. "She made me say it. She said if I did not back her up, she would ruin my life. She would post things about me online. She would make sure I had no friends. She would destroy me." What really happened that night? Alana took a shuddering breath. "Chloe called me around 10 at night. She was crying. She said she did something bad and needed help. She made me drive to the phosphate mines. When I got there, she was covered in dirt, and there was blood on her jacket. She said Emma had an accident, and I needed to help her make sure no one found out. I was so scared. I did not know what to do. She put something in my car trunk, but she would not let me look. We drove around for like an hour while she figured out what to do. Then she made me drop her off at her house, and she told me to delete all our messages from that night. What was in your trunk? Alana sobbed. I do not know. I never looked. She cleaned it out later. The deputies searched Alana's car that same night. Luminol testing revealed traces of blood in the trunk, microscopic spatters that had survived Chloe's cleaning attempt. The blood matched Emma Morrison. But Alana had one more piece of information. Before she helped Chloe that night, before the panic and the terror, Chloe had sent her a video file. It was insurance, Alana explained. Chloe sent it to me a few days before Emma disappeared. She said she was going to scare Emma and she wanted proof. But I think she sent it to me so if anything went wrong, I would be implicated too. I would have to stay quiet because the video was on my cloud drive. Do you still have this video? Miller asked. Alana nodded. I was too afraid to delete it. I thought if I did, she would know somehow. It is in a hidden folder on my cloud storage. I need you to give me access to that video. Alana looked at her parents again. They nodded. Okay, she whispered. The video file was downloaded that night. Detective Miller watched it 3 times, feeling colder each time. The file was 47 seconds long, high-definition video recorded on a smartphone. It showed Chloe standing in a wooded area at night, illuminated by what appeared to be a camping lantern. She was wearing a distinctive jacket, brass buttons gleaming in the light. The Oak Ridge County medical examiner later confirmed the vegetation visible in the video matched the area where Emma's body was discovered. In the video, someone was on the ground, mostly out of frame, but Emma's voice could be heard. Please, Chloe, I am sorry. Please do not do this. Chloe looked directly at the camera and smiled. See? I told you I would do it. Then she raised her arm. The camera angle did not show what she was holding, but the sound that followed, the terrible, wet, cracking sound, left no doubt. Emma's pleading stopped. Chloe laughed. A bright, girlish laugh, completely at odds with what she had just done. I am a woman of my word, she said to the camera. Then the video ended. The metadata embedded in the video file contained GPS coordinates that matched the crime scene location to within 3 meters. The timestamp showed the video was recorded at 10:17 at night on September 29th. The medical examiner had estimated Emma's time of death between 10 and 11 at night on September 29th or early on September 30th. The video did not just provide evidence, it documented the murder in real time. On October 10th, an arrest warrant was issued for Chloe Elizabeth Vance. The charge was upgraded from accessory after the fact to first-degree premeditated murder. A tactical team arrested her at her home at 6 in the morning. She answered the door in silk pajamas, holding her phone. When Detective Miller read her the charges, Chloe's expression barely changed. You are making a mistake, she said calmly. I want my lawyer. The arraignment followed 2 days later, setting the stage for what would become one of the most closely watched trials in Oak Ridge County history. The preliminary hearing on October 20th established the basic facts of the prosecution's case. Judge Sterling heard testimony from Detective Miller, who walked through the investigation timeline. He described the discovery of the body, the text message evidence, the button found at the scene, and the blood evidence in Alana's car. But the trophy video was not introduced yet. Prosecutor Jenkins was saving that for trial. She wanted maximum impact. She wanted it to destroy Chloe in front of the jury when there would be no recovery. Attorney Holbrook cross-examined Detective Miller aggressively, trying to poke holes in the investigation. Isn't it true that the crime scene was contaminated by the initial responding officers? Isn't it true that the chain of custody for some evidence is questionable? Isn't it true that my client was never read her Miranda rights during the initial interview at her home? Miller handled each question with professional calm. No, sir. The scene was properly secured within minutes. No, sir. All evidence was handled according to protocol. And no, sir. She was not in custody during that initial interview and was free to leave at any time. Therefore, Miranda warnings were not required. The hearing lasted 4 hours. At the end, Judge Sterling ruled that there was sufficient probable cause to proceed to trial. Trial was set for November 15th, giving both sides less than a month to prepare. In the weeks leading up to trial, Prosecutor Jenkins and her team worked 18-hour days. They interviewed every potential witness multiple times. They reviewed every piece of forensic evidence. They prepared exhibits, organized timelines, and created visual aids for the jury. Jenkins met with the Morrison family regularly, keeping them informed, but also managing their expectations. Murder trials were unpredictable. Juries could be swayed by emotion, by a persuasive defense attorney, by the youth and appearance of a defendant. But Jenkins had the video. Every time she watched it, every time she heard Chloe's voice saying, "See, I told you I would do it," she felt her resolve harden. This was not just about justice for Emma Morrison, though that was paramount. This was about sending a message that violence had consequences, that narcissism and entitlement could not shield someone from accountability, that the performance would not save you when the truth came out. The defense team was in a difficult position. Attorney Holbrook knew the evidence was damning. He had reviewed the discovery and understood the prosecution's case was strong. His private conversations with Chloe were exercises in frustration. She refused to take the situation seriously. She insisted the jury would love her. She wanted to testify, convinced she could charm them. Holbrook spent hours explaining why that would be catastrophic. The prosecution would eviscerate her on cross-examination. But Chloe was convinced of her own brilliance. She had a backup plan, she told him. The video was fake. It had been manipulated. Alana had created it to frame her out of jealousy. The prosecution could not prove otherwise. Holbrook had the video analyzed by a digital forensics expert who confirmed it was authentic, unedited, and contained metadata that would be nearly impossible to fabricate. When Holbrook shared this information with Chloe, she simply shrugged. "Juries do not understand technology," she said. "We will confuse them." The trial began on November 15th. The courthouse was surrounded by media trucks. Court TV was providing gavel-to-gavel coverage. True crime podcasters had set up camp in the overflow room where audio was piped in for those who could not get seats in the gallery. The jury selection had taken 3 days. The final panel consisted of 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from 24 to 67. A retired teacher, a construction supervisor, an accountant, a stay-at-home father, a nurse. People from different backgrounds, unified by their sworn duty to render a fair verdict. Opening statements began at 9 in the morning. Prosecutor Jenkins stood before the jury in a black suit that conveyed both authority and solemnity. She placed her hands on the jury box rail and looked each juror in the eye. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about a young woman who believed she could literally get away with murder. The evidence will show that Chloe Vance, sitting right there, killed Emma Morrison in cold blood because of jealousy, spite, and an ego that could not tolerate rejection. Emma's crime? A boy Chloe wanted asked Emma to a dance instead. For that, Emma paid with her life. Jenkins walked them through what they would see: the threatening text messages, the forensic evidence, the testimony of witnesses, and yes, she said, video evidence of the murder itself. Some of you will find this evidence disturbing. It is disturbing. It is supposed to be disturbing. Because what Chloe Vance did to Emma Morrison was not an accident. It was not a moment of passion. It was calculated, deliberate, and cruel. And the evidence will prove that beyond any reasonable doubt. Attorney Holbrook's opening was a masterclass in creating doubt where none should exist. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here because a young woman is dead and the community wants answers. They want someone to blame. They want closure. And so law enforcement zeroed in on my client, a 17-year-old girl with no criminal record, and built a case around her using questionable forensics, unreliable witnesses, and circumstantial evidence. He acknowledged the text messages but characterized them as typical teenage drama. He suggested the physical evidence could have alternate explanations. He portrayed Alana as a jealous girl who had her own reasons to harm Emma and who was now trying to deflect blame onto Chloe. And the video? We will present evidence that it has been digitally manipulated, that the metadata can be falsified, that in the age of deep fakes and artificial intelligence, video evidence is not as reliable as the prosecution wants you to believe. The performance had begun. The prosecution's case unfolded over 2 weeks. Witness after witness took the stand, each adding another layer to the narrative. Emma's friends testified about the escalating tension with Chloe. Tyler Chen, the boy at the center of the jealousy, testified that he barely knew Chloe and had never led her on. She just assumed we would be together, Tyler said. When I asked Emma to homecoming, Chloe confronted me in the hallway and said I would regret it. The forensic evidence was presented in painstaking detail. The soil analysis was particularly damning. A geologist from the State Crime Lab testified that soil samples from Chloe's car tires contained a unique mineral composition found in only one location in the county, the area around the old phosphate mines where Emma's body was discovered. The probability of that soil coming from anywhere else was essentially zero. Chloe sat through all of this with remarkable composure. She took notes. She whispered to her attorney. She adjusted her hair in the glass partition. During breaks, she was seen chatting with her father as if they were discussing vacation plans rather than murder charges. The jury noticed. Several jurors were observed frowning at her casual demeanor. The medical examiner's testimony was brutal. Dr. Huang described Emma's injuries in clinical detail. Massive blunt force trauma to the occipital region of the skull. Fracture patterns consistent with multiple blows from a heavy object. Fragments of bone driven into the brain tissue. Death would not have been instantaneous. Emma would have been conscious for several seconds, aware of what was happening to her. Rebecca Morrison fled the courtroom during this testimony. Thomas Morrison remained, gripping the bench in front of him so hard his knuckles turned white. Attorney Holbrook cross-examined every witness aggressively. He suggested alternative theories. Maybe someone else killed Emma and planted evidence to frame Chloe. Maybe the forensic analysis was flawed. Maybe witnesses were mistaken or lying. But the evidence kept piling up. Witness after witness, exhibit after exhibit, until the weight of it seemed insurmountable. Then came Alana Whitmore. The prosecution called her on day 9 of the trial. Alana walked to the witness stand on visibly shaking legs. She wore a simple blue dress and no makeup. She looked like she had not slept in weeks. Before she even sat down, Chloe leaned forward at the defense table and stared at her. It was the same intimidating stare she had perfected over years of ruling her social circle through fear. But this time, Alana did not look back. Prosecutor Jenkins approached the witness stand gently. "Miss Whitmore, I know this is difficult. Take your time. Can you tell the jury how you know Chloe Vance?" "We have been best friends since 6th grade, Alana said. Her voice was so quiet, the judge had to ask her to speak up. "We did everything together." "Did there come a time when Chloe asked you to lie for her?" "Yes, after Emma disappeared. She called me and told me that if anyone asked, I needed to say she was with me at the bonfire all night." "Did you initially agree to lie for her?" Alana's voice broke. "Yes, I was scared of her. She could be really mean if you crossed her. And I thought maybe she was innocent and just paranoid about being blamed because of the text messages." "When did you learn the truth?" Alana looked at her hands. "When Detective Miller showed me the evidence. When I realized what she had actually done. And when I remembered the video." "Tell us about the video." "A few days before Emma disappeared, Chloe sent me a video file. She said she was going to teach Emma a lesson and wanted documentation. At the time I thought she meant like embarrassing her at school or something. I didn't realize." The llama stopped, unable to continue. "What happened to that video?" "I saved it on my cloud storage in a hidden folder. I was too afraid to delete it because I thought Chloe would know somehow. And maybe part of me knew I might need it someday." Jenkins turned to the judge. "Your Honor, at this time the state would like to introduce Exhibit 42B. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. A large monitor was wheeled into position where the jury could see it clearly. Prosecutor Jenkins loaded the video file. Before playing it, she warned the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to see is graphic and disturbing. It shows the final moments of Emma Morrison's life. If anyone needs to step out, please do so now." No one moved. Jenkins pressed play. The video quality was shockingly clear. Modern smartphones captured high-definition video even in low light. The camping lantern provided harsh illumination, creating stark shadows. Chloe appeared on screen, wearing the distinctive designer jacket with brass buttons. She looked directly at the camera with an expression of excited anticipation, like someone about to open a birthday present. Then Emma's voice, trembling with terror. "Please, Chloe, I am sorry. Please do not do this." Chloe smiled. It was the same dimpled smile she had flashed at the gallery during her arraignment. "See? I told you I would do it." The sound that followed made several jurors flinch. The wet, crushing impact of metal against bone. Once, twice, 3 times. Emma's pleading stopped, just silence and Chloe's breathing. Then Chloe laughed, that bright, girlish laugh. "I am a woman of my word." The video ended. The courtroom remained frozen in horrified silence. At the defense table, Chloe's face had gone grey. The color drained from her skin as if someone had pulled a plug. Her hands, which had been casually folded on the table, began to tremble violently. She tried to stop them by sitting on them, pressing her palms against the chair. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. The smirk that had been her constant companion throughout the trial was gone, replaced by a wide-eyed stare of dawning realization. The performance was over. There was no coming back from this. Attorney Holbrook put his head in his hands. His associate counsel, a young woman who had been with him for 3 years, had tears running down her face. She was not crying for Chloe. She was crying for Emma. In the gallery, Rebecca Morrison was sobbing into her husband's shoulder. Thomas Morrison stared at Chloe with an expression of pure hatred. The jury's reaction was perhaps the most telling. 2 women in the back row had their hands over their mouths, eyes wide with shock. A male juror in his 50s had gone pale. The retired teacher in the front row was crying openly. The construction supervisor shook his head slowly, as if trying to deny what he had just witnessed. Every single juror looked at Chloe with revulsion. Prosecutor Jenkins let the silence stretch. She wanted the weight of what they had just seen to settle fully before she spoke again. Then she turned to Alana. "Miss Whitmore, you have seen this video before, correct?" "Yes," Alana whispered. "Is this the video file that Chloe sent to you before Emma's murder?" "Yes." Jenkins turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just watched Exhibit 42B. The state will now present expert testimony regarding the video's authenticity and metadata. Over the next hour, a digital forensics expert from the Federal Bureau of Investigation testified about the video's properties. He explained that the metadata embedded in the file contained GPS coordinates matching the crime scene, a timestamp matching the medical examiner's estimated time of death, and device identifiers consistent with Chloe's phone. He testified that the video showed no signs of manipulation or editing. It was authentic, original footage captured on the device indicated by the metadata. More importantly, he testified that creating a fake with this level of detail would require sophisticated equipment and expertise far beyond what any teenager would possess. The shadows, the lighting, the audio characteristics, the compression artifacts, all indicated this was genuine video captured at the time and location the metadata suggested. Could this video have been fabricated? Attorney Holbrook asked on cross-examination. Anything is technically possible, the expert replied. But in my professional opinion, based on my analysis, this video is authentic. The probability that it was fabricated approaches 0. Holbrook tried. He asked about deep fake technology, about AI video generation, about metadata spoofing. But the expert calmly explained why each scenario was implausible. The technology required did not exist at the consumer level. The level of detail was too precise, and, most damning, The video showed Chloe wearing the specific jacket that tied to the button found at the crime scene. To fake that would require advanced knowledge of evidence that was not discovered until after the video was allegedly created. The prosecution rested its case at 3 in the afternoon on day 11 of the trial. Attorney Holbrook moved for a judgment of acquittal, arguing the evidence was insufficient. Judge Sterling denied the motion in about 15 seconds. The defense called only 3 witnesses: a digital expert who tried to raise doubt about the video's authenticity, but was thoroughly discredited on cross-examination; a character witness who testified that Chloe was a sweet girl who volunteered at a food bank, which Prosecutor Jenkins demolished by showing Chloe had only volunteered twice, and both times were for mandatory community service hours required by school. And finally, a psychologist who testified about teenage brain development and impulse control, trying to suggest Chloe was not capable of premeditated murder. Holbrook did not call Chloe to testify. He knew it would be suicide. Jenkins would destroy her. Closing arguments took place on day 13. Attorney Holbrook gave it everything he had. He talked about reasonable doubt. He suggested alternate theories. He reminded the jury of their solemn duty to presume innocence. But his heart was not in it. He knew the video had sealed his client's fate. Prosecutor Jenkins was devastating. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence, showing how each element connected to form an unbreakable chain. The motive: jealousy over a boy. The means: the blunt object that was never recovered but clearly visible in the video. The opportunity: the night of September 29th, when Chloe lured Emma to the phosphate mines. And most importantly, the video proof of malice and premeditation. She planned this. She documented it. She executed it. And then she tried to cover it up by intimidating her friend into lying for her. Jenkins stood directly in front of the jury box for her final words. Chloe Vance is not a victim. She is not misunderstood. She is not a child who made a mistake. She is a calculating killer who ended Emma Morrison's life because her ego could not handle rejection. She recorded the murder like it was content for social media. She smiled while doing it. She laughed. And then she tried to manipulate all of you by playing the innocent girl. But you have seen the truth. Emma Morrison will never graduate high school. She will never go to college. She will never fall in love, get married, or have children. Her parents will live with this pain forever. All because Chloe Vance could not accept that a boy liked someone else. The only verdict that honors Emma's life and reflects the truth of what happened is guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, the retired teacher, stood to read the verdict. Her voice was steady and clear. We, the jury, find the defendant, Chloe Elizabeth Vance, guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Chloe slumped in her chair. All the arrogance, all the confidence, all the narcissistic certainty that she would prevail collapsed. She looked small and defeated. Her father sat motionless in the gallery, staring straight ahead. He had not spoken to his daughter since the video was played. He could not reconcile the smiling girl in that video with the child he thought he knew. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, on December 5th. Florida law required a separate penalty phase for first-degree murder. The prosecution would present aggravating factors. The defense would present mitigating factors. and Judge Sterling would ultimately decide the sentence. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Overflow spectators watched on monitors in adjacent courtrooms. The Morrison family sat in the front row, dressed in black. Thomas Morrison held a large photograph of Emma, the same one from her Sweet 16 party. Prosecutor Jenkins called the Morrisons to give victim impact statements. Rebecca Morrison went first. She walked to the podium slowly, as if her legs might give out. She looked directly at Chloe, who was staring at the table. "You took my baby from me," Rebecca said. Her voice was thick with grief, but steady. "You took her because you were jealous, because you could not handle being told no." Emma was kind. She was smart. She was funny. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She loved animals more than anything. And you killed her like she was nothing. You laughed while you did it. I heard you laugh on that video. How could you do that? How could you kill someone and laugh? Rebecca's voice broke. She took a moment to compose herself. "Every night, I go to bed knowing my daughter died in terror and pain. Every morning, I wake up and remember she is gone. You are 17 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Emma will never be 18. She will never graduate. She will never have any of the things you took for granted. And you did this to her. You." Thomas Morrison spoke next. He was a man of few words, but his statement was powerful in its simplicity. "You wanted to be famous, Chloe. You wanted attention. You got it. The whole world has seen what you really are. My daughter was worth 1,000 of you. You are nothing. You are a monster. And I hope every single day you spend in prison, you remember what you did. I hope Emma's face haunts you forever." The defense called no witnesses for mitigation. What could they say? Yes, Chloe was young. Yes, she had no prior criminal record. But the video existed. The evidence was undeniable. Attorney Holbrook simply asked the court for mercy, citing Chloe's age and asking for the possibility of parole at some point in the distant future. Then Judge Sterling spoke. She had been mostly quiet throughout the trial, observing, taking notes, ruling on objections. But now she leaned forward on the bench and addressed Chloe directly. Her voice carried the full weight of moral authority. "Miss Vance, look at me." Chloe slowly raised her head. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hair, which she had so carefully styled throughout the trial, was disheveled. She looked nothing like the confident girl who had sashayed into the courtroom 7 weeks earlier. "This court has witnessed your theater for 3 weeks, Judge Sterling began. You treated this sanctuary of justice like a stage. You preened for the cameras. You winked at your father during your arraignment. You rolled your eyes when Emma Morrison's name was mentioned. You smirked at the jury. You adjusted your hair in the glass partition as if you were preparing for a photo shoot. You thought this was a performance, and that your youth, your appearance, and your privileged background would save you." Judge Sterling paused, letting her words sink in. But Exhibit 42B revealed the truth. It stripped away your mask and showed us who you really are. You are not a misunderstood teenager. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a cold, calculating predator who enjoyed the suffering of another human being. You killed Emma Morrison because she had something you wanted. A date to a dance. That is the extent of your motive. Not self-defense, not accident, not passion. Jealousy and ego. The judge's voice grew harder. You did not just kill her, you documented it. You recorded your crime like it was entertainment. You looked into the camera and said, "See, I told you I would do it," as if murder was an accomplishment to be proud of. You laughed while Emma Morrison lay dying at your feet. You laughed. What kind of person does that? What kind of darkness exists inside someone who can take a life and find it amusing? Chloe was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her shoulders. But Judge Sterling did not soften. You then attempted to cover up your crime by intimidating your friend Alana Whitmore into providing a false alibi. You threatened her. You manipulated her. You used her fear of social ostracism to make her complicit in your lies. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no recognition that what you did was wrong. Even when confronted with evidence, you maintained your performance, believing you could charm your way out of consequences. Judge Sterling looked at the Morrison family. Emma Morrison was 16 years old. She was a daughter, a friend, a student with dreams and plans and a future. You erased all of that because you could not handle rejection. You have destroyed not just Emma's life, but the lives of everyone who loved her. Her parents will never recover from this loss. Her friends will carry this trauma forever. This community has been scarred by your actions. The judge returned her gaze to Chloe. The law provides a range of sentences for first-degree murder. On the low end, life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. On the high end, life without parole. I have considered your age. I have considered that you have no prior criminal record. I have considered that your brain is still developing and that teenagers are, in general, more impulsive and less able to fully appreciate consequences. But I have also considered the nature of your crime, the premeditation, the cruelty, the complete absence of empathy or remorse. The video evidence shows beyond any doubt that this was not an impulsive act. You planned this. You executed it. You documented it. And you felt nothing but satisfaction. Judge Sterling's voice was like iron. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your natural life in the custody of the Florida Department of Corrections. You will never be free. You will never walk on a beach, attend a wedding, hold a grandchild, or experience any of the joys that define a human life. You wanted to be famous, Miss Vance. Now, you will be a number. The judge struck her gavel. This court is adjourned. Chloe was led out in shackles. She tried to look at her father one last time, but Gregory Vance had already left the courtroom. He could not bear to see his daughter in chains, not because he felt sympathy, but because he felt shame. The girl he raised had become something monstrous, and he would spend the rest of his life wondering how he had failed to see the warning signs. The Morrison family embraced in the hallway outside the courtroom. They had justice, but it felt hollow. Emma was still gone. No sentence could bring her back. In the months following the trial, the case prompted legislative action. State Representative Maria Gonzalez introduced the Alana Law, designed to provide better protection for minors who come forward with evidence against peers in serious crimes. The law included provisions for counseling, legal immunity for those who were coerced into initial false statements, and enhanced penalties for witness intimidation targeting minors. It passed unanimously. The trophy video became a subject of national discussion about social media, narcissism, and the desensitization to violence among young people. Psychologists analyzed Chloe's behavior. Criminologists studied the case as an example of malignant narcissism in adolescence. True crime documentaries were produced. Emma's parents started a foundation in her name to support animal shelters, honoring their daughter's love of animals. Chloe Vance was transferred to Lowell Correctional Institution, a women's prison in Ocala, Florida. She would spend the rest of her life there. No appeals were filed. Attorney Holbrook had explained that the evidence was so overwhelming that any appeal would be futile. The video alone was insurmountable. In prison, Chloe was no longer special. She was no longer the center of attention. She was inmate number W458732. She shared a cell with a woman serving 20 years for armed robbery. She ate in a cafeteria with hundreds of other inmates. She worked in the prison laundry for 11 cents an hour. The performance was truly over. Back in Oak Ridge County, the courthouse returned to normal operations. Other cases filled the docket. Other tragedies played out in courtroom 3A. But sometimes, late in the afternoon, when the light slanted through the tall windows, bailiff Marcus Webb would walk through the empty courtroom and remember the Vance trial. He would remember the arrogance of the defendant, the grief of the Morrison family, and the terrible moment when the video played and everyone in the room understood the depths of human cruelty. On the floor near the defense table, mostly hidden under a bench, lay a small white ribbon. It had fallen from Chloe's hair on the day of sentencing and been overlooked during cleanup. It remained there for weeks, a tiny remnant of a girl who believed she could get away with murder. Eventually, a janitor swept it up and threw it away, and even that small trace of Chloe Vance was erased from the courthouse, where justice had finally caught up with her performance.